Thank you everyone for joining us and for our first physical event in almost a year, I think. So welcome back for those of you who are coming back, and welcome for those of you who are new. Who's here for the first time? Okay, welcome. And for those of you joining us online as well, we should be live and you should be able to hear and see us. So the format we're going to do is we'll do the energy transfer toward the end, maybe in the last half an hour. If we run out of questions ahead of time, we'll finish early and wrap things up. But we're going to do a Q&A format, so if you have any questions about anything in particular for either me or Barb, and so Barb is, well, she can tell you a little bit about herself, so you can have an idea of what kind of questions she may be able to answer, and then we can continue from there.
All right. My name's Barb Morey, and I'm an aura reader, and I talk to crystals and rocks as well. And yeah, it's fun. It's been a fun life, and I have to tell you, what is so fun is every Wednesday I volunteer to help. It's always good to volunteer at this Wall Lake Market, where they sell vegetables and eggs and honey and different things. And when I see these little kids grabbing at the rocks, it just thrills me because I know that they're seeing, oh, that one's calling me, and their mother's going, put it down, and they say, no, I want it. And I'm just going, oh, another little rock hound, And it just warms my heart. So, it just, I mean, I've seen it other places too, but, that time, I have an opportunity to see that. And it just, I get really emotionally and happy about, seeing these potential people that it can grow up. I've also seen auras my whole life. I didn't really even know it was any big deal about it. For me, it was like, hey, if you turn on a light switch, the light comes on. Are you going to say, hey, look at this, light comes on and light comes off? For me, seeing people, well, of course, I called it glowing. I had no idea it was auras. People would glow, and I found out when people don't glow that they're going to die, which once I found that out, every time I went on an airplane, I had to see the pilot and the co-pilot to make sure they were glowing. Otherwise, they were going to hit me. I might be screaming and hollering. I was not going to go on that plane. Which, I used to go flying out west a lot. And one time when we were on the way back, we had an airplane going back to Detroit, and it dropped like 500 feet, and things opened up, and everybody's screaming, and all upset, and I looked at everyone, I said, oh, you're all glowing, we're going to be just fine. They all settled down, believe it or not. They all settled down. So, and of course they clapped for the pilot and co-pilot, and I got a few of those too. So I mean, seeing that has been really, especially when I understood what was going on, it's been a real joy, in my life. I've always wanted to help other people, and I always knew I had healing hands because I would always help my dad when he had headaches or his back was hurting. He was a driver for Ford. He was a test driver, and so he'd be kind of miserable. And in my last office, before I retired from the post office, the rural carriers would try and say, oh, my shoulder hurts, I want to go home. I said, no, I'll fix it. You go back to work. I can't afford to get anyone get anyone else. Just go ahead and do your job, So I always was healing them and fixing them up, and so I don't know. I've just enjoyed my life, and I've had so many different lives in my life. I was married, and now I just joined all different kinds of groups. I went to school to investigate all different kinds of avenues. I was very curious, and I still am curious. And the other day I was saying, I wonder how many leaves are on a tree. No, that's stupid, but I wanted to know. So when I get my tree, and then I'm going to try to count them when they all fall down, just so that I know how much my maple tree has. But I mean, I'm insatiable curious. I always want to know things, and I always want to help others. And I have nieces and nephews and grandchildren, great grandchildren, and being able to wake up things in them is just going to be a blast. Especially I have one that's just turned 1 year old, so I'm really excited about that. So, and that's my life, and be honest with you, I've had so many, like I said, I've had so many different lives, but I mean, this one right here is like the culmination of all my curiosity is to join the Flower of Life when I met Ethan. It's just been, I mean, all these years and working so hard and trying to figure out what I want to do in life. And after him, I know what I want to do in life. I mean, he's just wonderful. He helped me really focus on helping people here and being able to reach out and all their expos and the children's and the mentoring that I'll be doing. And I can't tell you, it's been so wonderful, and I'm just so thrilled to be here, and I'm so thrilled that everyone online that you're here. Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone here, and welcome all the people that traveled so far, and I'm just very grateful.
So we're from the Flower of Life Institute, and we've been here doing events since 2012. A lot of different manifestations to the organization over the years. We have our local events, which are like what you see here today. We also do, or have been doing, an annual expo, although last year we didn't do one because of all the craziness with renting venues these days. And we probably won't do one this year either, but we will resume our expo, which is an annual event we were doing in downtown Detroit. So it's a 3-day intensive. So we will continue that down the line, so you can keep an eye out for that if you're interested in something that's more intensive. We have our kids programs, various programs for kids. You can find those on seedoflifeschool.com. And so we have virtual programs for kids, as well as in-person, hands-on weekend retreats as well. And we have a journal, Wake Journal. So if you're interested in reading articles that are high vibrational in nature, you can find those there. And of course, Awaken Empowered TV is our YouTube channel as well. So lots of different manifestations to what we do, and many long-term plans as well. We normally do events here once a month, although it became a little challenging this past year to do events here, and plus they were renovating. So we probably will resume in the near future, depending on what the climate is for doing physical events. But in the very least, we are live streaming them every month, regardless of whether we're here physically. So basically, we will be doing an energy transfer, which, if those of you are unfamiliar, I'll explain a little bit about it, but won't go too in depth, just because a lot of people have been coming repeatedly and are already familiar with the format. But we'll do that toward the end, and between here and there, we'll take any questions that you may have, as well as online. If you have questions, just post them into the messenger or the group chat, and we'll take those. And whatever point we run out of things, we will do the energy transfer and then wrap it up for the day. So, and if you're in the room here physically, we will ask you to take the mic just so that people online can hear your questions. And we do take donations if just to cover the cost of the venue. You don't have to donate anything. If you want to, that's great. If you don't, that's also great. If you're online, you can donate online as well by going to seedoflifeschool.com and click on the donate tab. And you can donate to any one of our various programs, whether it be sponsoring a child for mentorship, or we just launched a mentorship program for kids where kids get to work with different experts. So if there's a child who's a channel, for example, they can work with Michaela and learn and develop those talents. And we'll soon actually be having some interviews with kids. So we have one of the kids in our kids programs, whose name is Luke, and up until now it's been just me doing interviews, and soon we will have interviews where he will be doing interviews with other kids about their experiences and how they see the world and different things like that. So you'll see some shows soon as well with kids interviewing kids, as well as our usual formats. So, and if you want to catch any of our old stuff, I heard you were mentioning Luke, or what's his name? The numbers guy? Lloyd Meary, yeah. So there are lots of YouTube videos from previous events, and Lloyd being one of them, that are on our YouTube channel. So you can just search Awaken Empowered TV or my name on YouTube, and you'll find all those old interviews and other events we've done. So there's a lot of wealth of information and knowledge that's out there. So any questions so far?
Yeah, anyone in the room, raise your hand if you got a question for Ethan or Barb. There's a couple here. Barb, what's your most practical few crystals that you use most?
Well, I always like my quartz crystals, because I can feel the vibration really well with them. And well, tourmaline is another one, rose quartz, amethyst, luminaire, can't even think of how you say it. Yeah. Yeah, Lemurian crystal. I like that one too. But when I teach people using, to create an energy circle, I incorporate other rocks too, to build a circle, because a lot of people don't have a ton of crystals around. And so I think it was a few months ago, we got into discussion on what could you use besides rocks and crystals to build an energy circle. So we got talking about shells, and it even got to be feathers. And I'm going, oh really? Okay. But you have to find the feathers. You can't buy the feathers. They have to be found, because when you find them, that makes them special. But those are my favorite. And now, having said that, I'll use any rocks and crystals. I have a lot more than that. And every time that I take them somewhere, I always, not only do I have my working crystals, but I go back to all my other ones and ask them if they want to come. Because sometimes I change them around. Sometimes my working crystals say, oh, this time I'll pass. And so, because it's on individual people, or if I'm going to do it, a group, then I'll take the crystals that want to be in a group setting. So, but like I said, a quartz is my favorite, rose quartz, tourmaline, lemurium, and tourmaline can be, just the black tourmaline. It can be the pink tourmaline. It can be the green. I have a ring that's pink and green. They call it watermelon tourmaline. There's, some other, you can even use the geodes. The geodes have a lot of energy, and it's really fun when you open them up, because you never know what you're going to get. So, but there is no right and there is no wrong as far as crystals and rocks, goes. It's whatever you're drawn to would be fine.
I think the best sight ever is watching Barb come up to your front door with a suitcase that she's rolling of crystals. That's like my favorite sight ever.
She doesn't travel light.
She doesn't travel light.
Travel light.
No. All right, Barb. So can you teach others to see an aura?
I have given classes in auras, yes. And the last time I gave a class in auras, I had a black sheet and I had a white sheet. And I would have somebody stand in front of the black sheet, and then I'd have them stand in front of the white sheet. Because some people can see the difference on a darker border, and some can see it on a lighter border. Now, what you do is you have to look past the person, and you kind of blur your eyes a little bit, and you'll notice something. I mean, if you just, a lot of times I'll just go in the car and I'll put my hand down. Okay, it's all right. This is going on today. I need to adjust it. Let's bring a couple crystals with me. So, yeah, I believe I could teach you. Yeah, I've done it before. So, yes.
Isn't your video
Yeah,
online now?
I'm thinking I have one online too, I believe.
Yeah, just search Barb's name on YouTube.
This question is for Barb, and it's about crystals. And I was wondering, have you ever noticed any crystals taking on like a density? If they're helping to clear or work with your environment or the person that has the crystal? I've had a couple crystals. I have a Herkimer diamond crystal that I got from Sedona. And when I purchased it, it was clear. And then I've noticed that it's got some dark spots on it. And some of my other crystals as well. And I don't know if that's them and if it's a change in their formation or if it's that they're taking on something out of the environment. So I was just wondering if you've ever experienced anything like that.
Okay, well, let me tell you my worst crystal story. Okay. And then I'll finish answering it. I might as well tell you this. I had a beautician that she told me that her doctor wouldn't let her work because she had throat cancer. And she said, Barb, I can't afford to not to work. I said, okay, I'll keep you working. So I did massage back then and I had my crystals and I was, worked on her. She worked the whole time that she was going through her chemo and that. So after her chemo was over, I took this beautiful amethyst cluster, and I put all my other rocks around it and I put it on her throat, for her throat chakra. And as I was doing my stuff, energy balancing and holding points on the head. I was holding points on the head. You kind of feel the hot spots and you just kind of hold that with the crystal on her. She's laying down on the table. And I'm watching this crystal get darker and darker and darker and turn black. And it went boom and it shattered all over the room. I goes, took care of that crystal, didn't I? But what it did is it pulled out all that negative stuff out of it. Now, mind you, I didn't want to ruin my crystal like that, but this is my very first time that, I actually put it to work, went to work, and I worked it to death and died, but it helped the lady. So, and the crystal didn't mind. He said it was worth the sacrifice to help her. But what you do is when they turn the colors and stuff like that, they need to be cleansed. So you can either bury it in the ground. I usually put it out on the full moon. I put my working crystals out a lot in the full moon, and what helps is it cleanses them. You could also put it in clear spring water, and trying to think of. And sometimes I clear them with my crystal wand. I could do that too. So there's various ways to clean the rocks. So what they're doing is they're taking something environment, maybe your emotional state. They're trying to lift your spirits up, so they take out the negativity, and they like to do that. Crystals like to help. They're all about helping people. So when they change the color, then they need to be cleansed. Thank you.
Ethan, are you at peace? And if so, how did you get there?
Well, before I answer the question, let me back up a little bit. A lot of you probably don't know a lot about me, but we have to, in the earlier session with Michaela, somebody asked a question about Kundalini Yoga and whether it was valid or not, or if its integrity has been ruined because there's a lot of drama around the teacher who brought it to the world. And we have to sometimes, understand that just because somebody may be a spiritual master on the planet doesn't necessarily mean that they're not human. So, we may think about Jesus and think that all he did all day was walk on water and, and feed the people and such. But Jesus was also a husband and he was also a father, and he came home some days and his, Mary yelled at him, I'm sure, and made him sleep on the floor. And so he had these human experiences, just like everybody else has human experiences. So there was Jesus the Master who healed people and who taught people. But there was also Jesus the Father, and there was Jesus the husband, and Jesus who went to work and did something during the day and came home. So there we have to separate sometimes that human beings come to earth to experience human life. but we don't always know what is the consciousness inside of that human body. So somebody may come to Earth with a very expanded consciousness and do amazing things by being here. But they're also human, so they eat like everybody else. Not everybody eats, but most human beings also eat like everybody else, and they live, they breathe like everybody else, and they talk like everybody else. So we are still here to experience human life in human ways. So even though there's the Ethann sitting here who is a teacher, there's also the Ethann who drives a car and the Ethann who puts his pants on the same way everybody else does. So sometimes we have to separate those two things. And just because a teacher that we might have looked up to, like many of the spiritual teachers in recent years have fallen from grace, just because that happens doesn't necessarily invalidate the teaching of that teacher. So we have to keep those things in perspective, because there is certainly a lot of negativity around gurus and spiritual masters these days. I mean, if Jesus were here today, he may be telling everybody to get vaccinated and wear your mask. We don't know. We don't know the human that was Jesus. All we know is the spiritual master that was Jesus, and that's the one we read about and those things. We don't know the day-to-day that he experienced. Now, I highly doubt that he would have done that today, but I'm just making an example. So, I come from a mainstream background. Prior to 2012, I lived a regular life like everybody else, and was very entrepreneurial from a young child. I come from a business and financial background. So up until 2010, 2011, that was pretty much my life. And so around the end of 2010, I experienced one of many spiritual awakenings I've had in my life, and that sort of sent me in this direction. And soon after I met Barb, and then soon after I met Michaela and started this organization and so on. So the answer to the question, we're all on a journey, and we're all always evolving. If my journey here, not only as a teacher and also somebody who works with consciousness, that if there was not a need for that on the planet right now, then I would not be here. My life would end. And if my journey as a human being, that is Ethann, was complete as well, if there's nothing for me to learn and evolve in my physicality in this life, then I would not be here. So I would drop dead and life would be over. So ultimately, what is the purpose of human life? What is our ultimate goal as human beings? Well, it's to reach death in one piece. So at some point, I guarantee that all of you will reach that point successfully. And just like I will reach that point successfully. That is our goal in this life, is to die someday. But the how we get to that point is what's the difference, and that matters, and that varies from person to person. Some people go from birth to death with suffering, and whether that is fear, especially nowadays. I mean, the last couple of years on the planet, the fear scale has been elevated to such a great degree, and so so many people are worried about dying that they're forgetting about living, and that's what separates somebody who is of a higher level of consciousness from somebody who is of a lower one. Doesn't mean that they don't experience physical things in life. They do, and all of you are at different stages of consciousness. But you all also have human lives, and you may have a bad day or a bad moment, or maybe even a bad year. And the higher your level of consciousness, the less you're impacted by those external influences, the less you experience fear and negative emotions and negative things in life. Even if everything in your life is falling apart, on the inside, you experience more stillness than somebody else who is experiencing more suffering and fear in life. So this is what separates higher consciousness from lower consciousness. Generally, individuals of a higher consciousness, even if they put their pants on the same way as everybody else does, they will not experience the suffering that a person of a lower consciousness will. So this is why you're here today, is to move further on that journey. So now, do I never experience a bad moment or whatever? No, that wouldn't be true. But it's pretty rare. And I would say that regardless of external circumstances, I don't really suffer in life. And even with all of the chaos and turbulence in the planet the last couple of years, I've not experienced that. In fact, this period of time, although I've gone through many changes and challenges in the past 2 years because of global events, I have actually experienced it as one of the best times in my life. But I've just simply pivoted in another direction. And this is what happens when our consciousness expands. We don't have as much resistance to things in our life. So resistance meaning, a lot of people are suffering today because they can't do the things they could do a couple of years ago. And because of that, they're struggling with this time that we're in. But if you understand that your life is always on course, you're exactly where you need to be right now. And even if there are world events that are preventing you from living in the same way you were 2 years ago, there's no accident that those things are occurring right now. Those things are occurring right now in order to coerce you in another direction, in order to get you to do different things. Now, I've studied numerology for almost 30 years, and astrology, of course, too. And one of the great benefits of that knowledge is you can see where the cycles are going, and you can forecast your own life with an extreme level of accuracy, and it brings so much understanding to your life journey and the journey of others. And I can go over my entire life, and just using simple numerology, the same patterns repeat over and over again. And because of that, there are years when things fall apart in my physical three-dimensional life. And it's predictable. I can tell you when the next time will be. So if that is true, and there's a cycle like that exists, that I don't have human control over, that is something that's part of the nature of reality that I exist within, then that means that there is a reason and a purpose for every moment that we're here. And even though we may not like it, and that's the nature of resistance is, well, something is happening in our life and we don't like it, so we fight up against it. Just because we don't like it doesn't mean it isn't supposed to be so. So while many things in the world right now are making a lot of people unhappy, those things are there because we're just meant to go in another direction. And if you don't resist that and instead look for opportunities to redirect your path in something that's more empowering and joyful, then you'll find that this time on the planet will actually have been a great advantage, a great benefit to you, because you'll find yourself going in directions that you never imagined you would go, that wouldn't have occurred if the events of the past 2 years didn't occur on the planet. And the same is true for our organization. Well, on the one hand, we were doing expos every year, and we haven't done that in the last year. And we were doing a lot of other things that we haven't done in the last year. So on the one hand, I could beat my head against the wall and say, that's terrible. On the other hand, it's given us an opportunity to build our kids' programs and so many other things that we would not otherwise have done. So I do experience a greater state of joy in my life than I would say most people. And because of that, I choose certain things in my physical life that other people don't choose. So you'll find that your state of being leads you to choices and to noticing things that other people who tend to be more in a state of suffering do not choose. And some of you notice this. Now, I'm very sensitive to the physicality of other people. So, I can look at other people, their faces, their bodies, and just, it's not something I learned or try to do. But some of you probably also do this, where you can tell the state of another person, what kind of person they are, how they experience life. Do they suffer? Are they joyful? It's generally written on their whole body. and certainly on their faces. And so you can always tell when somebody is suffering and when somebody is joyful. And that nature attracts different kinds of experiences to them, different kinds of opportunities, and it causes them to make different choices as well. So I would say, these days, a lot of people are struggling because they're stuck at home. I'm actually quite content and quite happy being stuck at home. Well, not that I'm stuck at home. Nothing's really changed in the past couple of years. And while everybody was stuck at home a year ago, I was still driving around living like I normally live. And that's the thing, is because I don't experience fear to the degree that most people experience fear, the events of the past 2 years have been inconsequential to my human journey. So, a lot of people got really angry with me. In fact, there's an actual forum online where they talk about Ethann and his crazy ideas about the virus. Because a year ago I was saying there isn't a virus. There is no virus. There's nothing to worry about. And a lot of people didn't like that because in their reality there is a virus and there's a pandemic and we have to be afraid and do these things. But in my reality there never was one. And because in my reality there never was one, it never really impacted me. Now, sure, problems with venues, doing events impacted me. But a virus never impacted me. I never took any action toward dealing with that reality. Never bought a mask, never wore a mask, never social distance, never stopped driving places that I normally would, never stopped doing anything I normally would. So in my reality, nothing changed. And that's because I don't live in a place of fear. I don't live in a fearful world. And so you'll find that as your consciousness expands, that you will exist in that place more and more often. If we could whack everyone in the head right now and bring them to a higher state of consciousness, the pandemic would go away because it doesn't exist in the first place. But it does exist in a lot of people's reality. And because it does exist in their reality, they manifest the symptoms of that existence in their reality. So in their world, there are things to be afraid of. And because of that, those things show up in their world. Now, you can live, for those of you who follow alternative media, there's a lot of craziness going on in Australia right now. And it's a very oppressive dictatorship of a country right now, and it's probably coming soon to the United States. But even there are people living in places in the midst of dictatorships who are living happily and freely. They're not at all impacted by any of it. Yet there are many people who are suffering and struggling in the midst of a dictatorship there and in other parts of the world. The thing that separates the two is the way of being of that individual will naturally pull them to places where there's more joy or more suffering, depending on who they are. To give you an example of what resistance is in a very simplistic sense. When there is a tsunami coming toward the beach, the people see it coming and they react and they start running in fear. And a lot of them don't succeed because the tsunami is coming. And this is human nature, is because humans are so out of tune with their higher connection to source and their higher consciousness, they are very reactive. So external circumstances come, in fear, we run from those things. Whereas wild animals in the area have long been gone. They sense, or rather, they're not reactive. They know that a tsunami is coming, but in their reality, it's not that they feel like, oh, there's a tsunami coming, therefore we must go to higher ground. But because they're so aligned with the universal energy and the forces of nature, that they naturally desire to go elsewhere. So if a tsunami is coming, the animals just excitedly go somewhere else because maybe there's more food there, or maybe there's something there that they want to be near. And so instead of being caught in the tsunami when it comes and running for dear life, they've already long gone. And this is what's missing in human nature, is we have become so disconnected from our connection to source that we, rather being drawn to excitement and joy, we instead react to fear and negative things. So ultimately, this potential is in all of us. And this is how I live my life. I find myself excitedly drawn to things that, when I do those things, or when I'm in the midst of doing those things, there may be chaos going on over here, but I don't perceive it because I've already moved on to the next thing. So when you exist in that space, it's not so much that I wake up every morning and say positive affirmations to myself to cheer myself up. I just happen to exist in a state of being that is just joyful, and as a result, I do joyful things. So, and that's how I would experience that. Now, does that mean I never ever experience the same reality other people do? That's not true. I mean, in the same way that, I may exist in this reality, and most of my conversations on a day-to-day basis are with people like you, all of you guys, and subjects of this nature. But every once in a while, I have to talk to a government official or go to Secretary of State. You know what that's like. And it's like coming off of a spaceship onto a strange planet, right? But I still have to do that. So sometimes I have to step from my higher dimensional awareness into a third dimensional awareness just to interact with human beings who exist there, and then get back on my ship and go back where I came from. So there are those times when I have to interact with a consciousness that may be a lower consciousness than I normally like to exist in. And all of you do that to some degree. I just happen to do it more often because I find myself now increasingly in life in a higher state of experience. And because of that, I find more of my life is in that joyful, more in alignment with source experience. And less of it is in that other state. And this is what we're experiencing on a planet today. We're experiencing that splitting of timelines that Michaela channels about a lot, where we are seeing one facet of society going into a very darker, more fearful place, and another facet of society starting to wake up and choosing a higher path. So hopefully that answers the question in a very long, drawn-out way. Is that what you were asking? Okay. Anyone else?
There's some questions online. Ethan, can you share your perspective on the energies of this equinox?
Yeah, I just quickly looked at the astrology before I came up here. And what I will say is, the equinox energies, there are different ways to look at astrology and numerology. There's a spiritual standpoint, and there's also the three-dimensional physical standpoint. And I've used those tools mostly to navigate my physical life. And while the equinox is really focused more on the sun and the moon, in the technical sense, I look at all the planetary alignments. And right now, as of this week, the sun and Mars are in conjunction over the next week. And also there's a Venus-Uranus opposition as well. So I would say one of the things that we will see, so Venus-Uranus has really to do with gathering, people getting together. And, it's our first physical event, so it's probably not an accident we decided to do it now. But you'll see that happening all over the world, too. I think more people are gathering right now. And you can see this with huge protests taking place in the world and so on. Now, the Sun-Mars tends to bring a lot of intense energy, but when you have the conjunction between the two, it kind of amplifies that energy. So I would say this equinox is a little bit more potent than most. Now, Sun-Mars can be a positive. It can bring more heat into the body. It can bring more intense solar energies. It can also increase anger as well on the planet. So on the negative side, we may see more protests, especially in the next week. Bigger protests, more hostility. But on the positive side, I think those energies can also be used for healing and other kinds of things. So anything you normally might do on a equinox, it would be more powerful in this particular one because of that alignment taking place. So that's all I remember off the top of my head. Now, in general, though, we are going into Saturn is about to go direct. Of course, Mercury's retrograde at the moment. And I talk about this a lot, but since we haven't done a physical event in a while, I'll mention it again. So Saturn is about to go direct, and meaning forward in the Earth's sky. And in the next several months until end of December, it will approach the planet Uranus and cross over it as of the end of December and into January. So one thing we will experience that as is an increase in restrictions on the planet, but also an increase in the people going against those restrictions, let's say. Because Uranus has to do with freedom, Saturn has to do with, or at least one of the things it can represent is our establishment and the rules and requirements and restrictions on the planet. So when the two are in square, we will see an increase in restrictions on the planet. Like, it's very apparent in places like Australia, for example, right now. But we'll see it here too. But because the planet Uranus is in square to Saturn, we will also see the people rebelling against those restrictions. So in the end, it'll be a stalemate. It doesn't mean there won't still be some restrictions there, but because of those opposing forces, both will fight up against each other. So we're going to see a lot of opposition against the various restrictions, but we'll also see a ramping up of those restrictions in the months ahead. And then in January and the months beyond, it'll start to lighten up again one more time. And then I think late summer, fall, it'll come back one more time. So that's some of what's taking place in this year ahead. Somebody asked a question, I think I'll just answer it since it's in the context, about when I talked about this last, because I mentioned that it was in two different contexts. One was based on cycles and astrology and numerology, and one was based on what's actually happening in world events. And what I was saying was the planet Pluto enters Aquarius at the end of next year, just as Saturn and Uranus are finally pulling apart for the last time. I think we've had 3 Saturn-Uranus squares by the end of next year. And Pluto entering Aquarius represents us moving into more of an Aquarian age. And although we are sort of entering the Aquarian age already, I think the real trigger for it will be when Pluto enters Aquarius, and which is around the end of next year. And it will remain there till 2045. So the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was in the 1700s. So it's been quite some time. And in the late 1700s was when we had the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and of course just before that we had a period of increased oppression on the planet, right? So we're seeing the same pattern repeating again that we're in now. So you'll see those patterns, those large universal patterns, repeat throughout history. And every time we've had this same pattern that's happening now, we've had an oppressive time on the planet, followed by a breaking free of those things and more freedom on the planet. Same economically. The last time these cycles occurred on the planet, economically, we were also going through a drastic change in the financial system, and we're also seeing that again now. So from a cycle standpoint, when Pluto enters Aquarius, we're going to start moving toward a freer society. But it'll take some time. It'll take some time, and the reason we're moving toward a freer society is because of the oppressiveness that this time has brought about. Because a lot of people are going to realize that they have to create a freer society because of the extreme nature of what we're experiencing now. And because of that, people are going to invent new things, they're going to create new schools, they're going to create new forms of travel that will not have the restrictions that are imposed on the rest of mainstream society. We'll see a new economic system also that'll be freer, and that's already happening. So there is that. that I do foresee coming in the near future. But meanwhile, though, the question that came into me, which I was going to answer on this live stream, was if that's true and I see things opening up and things becoming freer, then why did I make the comment that getting the vaccine or not has nothing to do with a vaccine, that it is just a step along the way of more of an oppressive society. And your agreement to participating in each of these stages of that is going to result in a very dystopian future. And because this is really not about, although there are many layers to this, this is really more about us moving into a very controlled, oppressive, dystopian future. Each time we agree to those restrictions, the next stage of the restrictions will be worse. And it may be a vaccine today, but already some of you may have known that MasterCard is introducing a new credit card that's going to be based on your carbon footprint. So if you eat too much or you drive too much or whatever, they'll lock your card. Unless you buy carbon credits. So this is the next stage of what's coming, and it would have never happened if we never would have agreed to wearing masks a couple of years ago. But each stage is going to become more severe than the previous stage, and a lot of people think that, well, if I just get vaccinated and wear masks, then this is all going to go away and we're going to go back to normal. But actually, the reverse is true. Each time you agree, the next stage of oppression is going to be more extreme. And so you can see those steps taking place in the global stage. So the question that I got was, well, if I think that things are going to get better on the planet, then why would I say that our choices are going to bring about a more dystopian future? And the reason is because the individuals who are orchestrating a lot of these things, they're not going to stop doing those things just because the world is going to improve. That society will come about. MasterCard is still going to do their thing, and there's still going to be carbon credits and all these kind of things. But meanwhile, Pluto going into Aquarius, I don't think is going to suddenly cause our world leaders to become enlightened and create a freer society. But what it will do is it's going to wake up all of you to bring about a more enlightened society. And as a result, we'll have products and services and new industries and things like that will emerge, that will restore freedom so that we have other options. And those people who want to live in a more fear-based, oppressive society will have that too if they want. So I see a time over the next 10 to 15 years, where both will coexist, where we will have a society that's very restricted and very controlled, and another society that is very free and open. And then eventually the free and open one will overwrite the other one, and we'll move toward a freer society. But it's up to you right now, by your vibration, your state of being, and your physical choices, which one you want to live in. You can live in either one right now, or you can choose to go down the more oppressive path. That's up to you. So that your choices that you make now have a bigger impact and implication on the future of the world and your own lives than what they appear to be on the surface. On the surface, it may be 6 feet apart. It's not a big deal, right? It's no big deal. Or wearing masks, no big deal. Wearing 4 masks, no big deal. A little bit less of a big deal, maybe, to wear 1. But what you don't understand is that each time it gets worse the next time. So, and so those choices you're making have nothing to do with what they appear to be, with what they appear to be on the surface, what you're being asked to do. They will eventually result in something very severe that nobody wants. But you don't have to worry, because your own vibration is your only responsibility, because even if we descend into a dystopian world, if your vibration is good, then you'll find yourself in that only pocket of peace and joy that exists in such a world. So ultimately, you all can create your own realities based on that.
So, this is for you, Ethan. This past year, we had to travel. My boyfriend and I had to travel on airplanes, and we're against wearing the mask and getting vaccinated and things like that. But they wouldn't let us fly unless we wore the mask. So we flew there, and then we said, "You know what? We're not doing this. We're going to drive home," because it felt just more in tune with what we believed. But I agree with absolutely everything you're saying. How do we stay true to ourselves if I do have to fly for work, or if I do have to fly for other things, and everybody's telling me, no, you have to wear a mask? I'm like, it doesn't follow suit with my beliefs in the spiritual realm and in the earthly realm as well. So what advice do you have for that?
Mm-hmm. There's nothing that you have to do. So you think you have to do those things because it's a pattern that you established in your life beforehand. My earlier example about, wild animals, when the tsunami's coming, they just find themselves on higher ground. They may not even know that a tsunami's coming. They just want to be somewhere else. And on the other hand, our pets, though, they would drown because they're our pets, they pick up on our resistance. They pick up on our human way of being. And so pets actually don't usually react the same way wild animals do. They're disconnected from source to a greater degree than wild animals are. So, a lot of people are having the same dilemma you're having, which is, you're used to a certain way of doing things, and now that way of doing things has all these obstacles in the way. And a lot of people are even getting vaccinated because they feel like, well, if I don't, I'll lose my job. And my advice is not something you're going to want to hear, but it is lose the job. Don't travel. Don't compromise your values and your self-empowerment to do things because, first of all, the universe always provides for you everything that you need in every moment that you need. But as human beings, we don't, we're a bit resistant to noticing or, say, out of alignment with source to know that when things are changing, that we're meant to be pushed in another direction. So for those people who are afraid of losing their jobs, well, I would say lose that job, because there's probably something even better for you that you're not even able to see while you're at that job. So don't put yourself in an environment where you're uncomfortable and do things that are out of alignment with who you are and with your own sense of self and being and self-worth and values, in order to maintain something that was there before and is not meant to be in the future. We see this happening on a global scale. For example, I would say a lot of these world leaders that are orchestrating these events, they're the most fearful on the planet. They're way more fearful than the rest of us, with exceptions, of course. Because the extreme nature of the things that they're doing right now are because people are waking up, and we're uncontrollable at the masses that we've grown to. And only individuals who are in fear and possess a very low self-confidence try to suppress other people. Because if you are a very confident, happy person, you want everyone else to be doing great too, because it doesn't take anything away from you. And it actually makes your life better. I mean, imagine if our world leaders and governments, instead of trying to oppress everyone, decided they're going to help everyone. And imagine the technologies that would come through. I mean, we could have all kinds of things that would extend lifespan. We could live in a utopia overnight. And that would take nothing away from them, because now suddenly they have access to all these things. Now, of course, they have access to a lot of things we don't, but because they're oppressing everybody, they're oppressing the creativity of so many human beings. Billions of human beings could create amazing things that they're not able to do because they don't have the means and because they're living in an oppressed society. But imagine if everybody was, instead of printing trillions of dollars and giving it away to banks and so on, what if, they helped everybody? Then they would also thrive because they would have access to amazing things, advancements in music and science and everything, if people were empowered to do those things. So the only individuals who wouldn't want that are individuals who are in such an extreme state of fear and insecurity. With all of their wealth and all of their power, they experience such a state of fear and insecurity that they have to oppress everybody else in order to feel better themselves. And in fact, they don't in the end. So these individuals are also in an immense state of resistance to what is. The awakening of expansion of consciousness is going to happen. They can't prevent it, but they have to go to such an extreme right now to prevent it because they're in so much fear over it happening. But what if they let it happen? What if they, instead of trying to maintain the world the way they've had for so long, accepted that this is the future that we're heading into and let it happen? And maybe that'll bring even better things into their life. So never compromise your values. And if you find you're compromising your values out of fear of not being able to do something you used to do before, no joy will come from that. But actually, you may find, let me give you a personal example. So in the past couple of years, because we do public events and we have an online presence and so on, all those things have been suppressed in the past couple of years. So we've had our Facebook pages deleted, we've had videos and all kinds of things censored, had the Detroit mayor and health department shut down our expo 2 days before. All these problems we had to deal with, right? And so on the one hand, I could beat my head against the wall and say, actually, in fact, to be more specific, we didn't have to cancel the expo. They gave us a condition 2 days before the event that if I contact trace everyone and make everyone wear masks and social distance, we can have our expo. And I said no. So on the one hand, I could have kept things the way they were because, we worked hard for a year. All these people were flying in and presenters and, all this money spent. If I want to keep things the way they are, we could have had the expo. But I wasn't willing to compromise my values and what we stand for as an organization, not to mention put all of you at risk, just to put on our expo and business like usual. And in the end, it was a big adjustment and a lot of things we had to deal with at the last minute. But it led to many other opportunities and changes of direction that would never have happened otherwise. So I would say that you're preventing yourself from seeing other things and other opportunities in the world that you would not otherwise have done or seen by trying to maintain things that are not available to you right now. So instead, try to tune into what you're drawn to that might excite you, and let that be for now. And eventually, it'll all come back, and it'll look different than before. It may not be the same airlines or whatever, but those opportunities will again be there when it's the right time for you. And right now, there's probably something else. I've done things in the last couple of years I never would have done because it's not my nature to have done those things. But because we haven't been able to do the things we were before, I was just naturally drawn to do the different things. And as a result, I'm actually happier than I was before. So that's what you're all missing out on by fighting up against a force that is actually working for your benefit, to try to nudge you in another direction. So try to look for what that direction is. Does that help?
So Ethan, how do you get your news? What news sources do you use?
Lots of things. Certainly not mainstream media, although on rare occasions maybe, just because I'm curious what they're thinking. But, I read a lot, first of all. I read, in probably the last 30 years, I've read at least a book every week or two. So nowadays, mostly audiobooks, but and because there's so much knowledge on YouTube these days, I find myself watching a lot of videos too, so I don't get through a whole book a week anymore because there's so many videos I also watch. But so my news comes from various sources. One, from a foundational understanding through many different books I read. And I read books, and I would encourage all of you to do that. And to see if you can diversify because you can't put together what's going on in the world unless you understand the landscape. And the landscape is very diverse and complex, and there are lots of, avenues. So, in a given week, I will be reading books or watching videos on everything from the financial system, the financial markets, to mind control, to spirituality, to the economy, to chaos happening in other countries, all kinds of things like that. So, I would hesitate to recommend any one particular thing because what makes my perspective a little different is, I can watch videos of suffering and chaos going in other countries on YouTube videos, for example, and not descend into chaos and suffering myself. So I will watch some of those just because I want to know what's going on. But it does not affect my state of being or my mood necessarily. And so it's hard for me to say. Depends on your area of interest, because I have a variety of areas of interest. So a lot of actually, just because my background is in business and finance, I tend to watch a lot of videos about that area, about the financial system and the economy and things of that nature. But I also watch other YouTube channels that are alternative media as well about what's going on in the world. So many things. It's hard for me to quantify because in a given day, I may watch 10 to 20 videos and watch and read a book in between. So for me, just walking down from downstairs to upstairs, I'm listening to a book or watching a video. So every moment that I have to fill with something, I'm filling it with something. So I would suggest try to learn as much as you can on a diverse areas of knowledge. And archaeology is another area that's very interesting to me. I watch a ton of, there's one guy I would recommend there. If you're interested in how we got here as a world from ancient times, there are some really talented researchers. There's one guy by the name of Robert Sepper who we may have out here someday at an expo or something. He's an anthropologist, and he researches ancient civilizations, and he's put together so many pieces of ancient societies to modern societies, and essentially how we got here, that creates a good foundation for the world that we're living in today and explains why things are taking place on the planet today as they are. But I can't answer that question specifically because we'd be here all day if I went through my list of everything I read and watch in a given week, for example. Right now I'm reading a book on a Sumerian text that was found some years ago in the late 1800s, I think. Can't remember the name of the text now, but anyway, That's my reading for the week, is the translation of this ancient text of ancient times. But last week I was reading about mind control. So, that's what I. And the previous week I was reading about Satanism. If you really want to know, because I want to know. I want to know what are these people on the planet who are doing these crazy things thinking? Like, what makes them tick? So from week to week to week, the subjects change, and they're very varied.
Okay. So this was for both of you. Can you tell us something that you feel is important to know about Atlantis?
I do know one thing though about Atlantis. They had a crystal society, and they ran free energy through crystals. So they had that technology back then that has been lost. And I mean, we utilize crystals through energy and healing and watches and stuff like that. But they used it actually to power their society. It was like a free society, and they were really in touch with their crystals back then, and it's something that we still need to explore and grow with. But that's about all, because I really haven't read too much about Atlantis, and my crystals really haven't talked too much about that to me, and it just hasn't really come up. So that's about all. That's all I can tell you.
It's a subject that's personal fascination, and I could talk for days about it. I'm not sure what specifically to focus on, but whereas Michaela channels a lot of this information, I'm more grounded and third dimensional in my understanding of things too. So because I research the topic a lot, and what's the latest and greatest in archaeological discoveries and so on. Atlantis definitely did exist. There's plenty of evidence to support that, and many of those ancient Atlantean societies are still alive today, although they've lost touch with their own, their ancient abilities. So Atlantis pre-existed about 9,000 years ago, and they were a very advanced race of beings. And when we read about the biblical flood essentially sort of dispersed that society, and they spread out around the world and became, ancient Egypt and all of the other races that we see around the planet today. There was a bloodline from Atlantis that carried forward to modern times. Now, keep in mind that in Atlantean times, there were gods who lived on the planet. Gods meaning, now we are approaching that as regular human beings now. We are getting back to what was only a handful of people in ancient times. And these are the gods we hear about. And those gods were of a specific bloodline, primarily Caucasian, actually. Blue-eyed Caucasian people, red hair, blonde hair. So the whole out of Africa theory is not actually proven in the archaeological and anthropological evidence. Most of the ancient gods were actually Caucasian and blue-eyed. This race actually carried forward into modern times. If you look at a lot of the ancient Egyptian artifacts, you'll see that they're depicted with blue eyes. So Egyptians in ancient times were actually from Atlantis. They were not the Egyptians that live there today, which have darker skin and darker eyes. So now this is why we find ourselves in a world full of leaders who intermarry, for example, like the royal families, they intermarry. And why, of all the presidents of the United States, only one was not of this bloodline. So I would ask all of you, if voting was really a thing, then how is it possible that every president but one has the same bloodline, of which only at maximum 15% of the planet has? So in a manner of speaking, they're not even the same race as the rest of us. Their blood is not interchangeable with the rest of us. So this is actual fact. This is not something I'm making up. But if you trace his bloodline, it comes from Atlantis. But now in Atlantean times, the Earth was a different place, and the beings who were gods at that time were really an enlightened race. But as society became more corrupted and these bloodlines started practicing more darker magic, let's say, darker spiritual practices, they sort of lost their abilities. They, in a manner of speaking, fell from grace, you might say, and they lost those advanced abilities that they very naturally had. And so this is why we see ancient times, they could build things like these massive pyramids, and then in modern times, we can't even approximate that technology. And so we are today led by the same bloodline of people on the planet, but they don't possess their abilities. So because of that, they use other means of being godlike on the planet. Technology, for example, chemtrails, smart meters, all these things. So in manner of speaking, they're still living like gods on the planet today, but they don't possess the abilities that they had, nor the consciousness that they once had in ancient Atlantean times. So in many ways, that bloodline, that race, has descended from grace and has descended in consciousness and ability, whereas the rest of the human race, which back in those times was actually less advanced, has actually escalated in consciousness and abilities. So this is why we're seeing people today on a much larger scale, channeling and seeing auras and doing all these kind of things. And that's only going to increase. It's because the human race is becoming like gods again. So we are still being led actually by an Atlantean race, or rather, I would say, an Atlantean bloodline. It's not the same as they used to be in ancient times. And so if we think about like Krishna and all of these gods from ancient times, they were all of the same very advanced race in ancient times, who possessed very advanced abilities and technology. But that race has, through interbreeding and through inappropriate spiritual practices, have sort of lost their advancement. So, I mean, I think that's the most practical thing I would say about Atlantis. But, there's 10,000. I mean, and one of the really great things about today, or this time, is there are so many things being revealed to us through archaeology and anthropology, and we're finding ancient cities all over the world every week. And of course, if at some point the Vatican and the Smithsonian ever unlock their hidden away stuff, we would experience a renaissance on the planet overnight. There's so much knowledge that's being sort of withheld. But at the same time, everyday people like you and me are out there doing this research and putting out videos, and so our knowledge of the past is growing exponentially every week. So it's exciting.
Barb, I've heard that some crystals protect against 5G and other unnatural sources like shungite. Is that true? And do you use any on a daily basis?
Yeah. Well, this one right here is tea tree agate, and this protects against radio waves, television waves, 5Gs, and it wasn't cheap. I love it, and yes, and I've heard shungite will do the same, but tea tree agate is definitely something. I said I hardly ever walk away without having it on, and when I don't wear it, I do feel a difference. So I highly recommend it.
So this is for Ethan. Can you speak a bit about the number 13? There's so much fear around this number. It's not even used in elevators. Does it connect with the creation of a 13th dimension in your guides? And how do you perceive the 13th dimension?
It's an interesting topic, and again, one I could talk a long time about. But well, 13 is actually a sacred number, but you'll find that a lot of things that are treated in a scary way in modern society are done that way to prevent us from learning about them or exploring them further. So Now, the various elite people or elite secret societies on the planet today, of which there are many that are known and unknown, and all of our world leaders are involved in some or all of them in some manner of speaking. They all practice and use numerology. And you can, for somebody like me who studies numerology and learns all these things, I notice it everywhere. So in everything that they do, you'll see they use numerology quite heavily. And 13 is a very sacred number. So, for example, Jesus had 12 apostles, which made him the 13th. So we have 12 dimensions, and there's a 13th, which is what I primarily work with. So the 13th dimension and the 13th, the number 13, wherever you find it. For example, there are 12 months out of the year, or there's 12 constellations, and now they're trying to introduce a 13th. So what you'll find is that whenever you see 13 mentioned anywhere, whether it is in the context of Jesus or dimensions or whatever, or the 13 families that rule the world. There are 13 families who rule the world. They're not the ones you vote for. They're the ones who choose the people you vote for. So while you're voting, they're choosing who's going to win. But there are 13 families. There are 12 families, and the 13th one is the primary family. So you'll always see 12, and the 13th one is the one that oversees the rest, or kind of dominates, or is more powerful than, you might say. So 13 is a very sacred number in numerology, and the elites use it in all of their practice. So you will not see a 14th family because they practice numerology. Yes?
And your 12 tribes of Israel.
Yeah, same thing. You'll see 12 a lot, but the 13 is almost never mentioned. You don't hear the 13th one because the 13th is always hidden. It's always the most secret. But there is always a 13th. Wherever you see 12, there's always a 13th. So it is a very sacred number. Now, in terms of 13th dimensional collective that I work with, they encompass all kinds of beings. They are, Jesus, Mary Magdalene, many ascended masters. I also have to coexist in the 13th dimension in order to do what I do. So whenever anybody, like say Michaela channels Pleiadians, she has to, in a manner of speaking, you might say, she has to exist in that dimension as a Pleiadian in the moment she's channeling it. So in the same way, when I'm channeling a 13th dimensional energy, there has to be a part of me that also is in the 13th dimension in order for me to facilitate that energy between two dimensions. So my purpose for being is really not to necessarily do the energy transfer. They do that. But rather that to be able to stand in both dimensions simultaneously and to allow them to, through this physical structure that exists in both, well, it's not physical in the 13th, but rather the structure that exists in both dimensions, to allow them to move energy back and forth between both. So in some ways, you might say 13 is the most sacred out of the 12 numbers, and 13 is also, and that's also why you will find it in all cases where it's used. It is hidden. Yeah, there's the 13th floor does not exist on an elevator because it's hidden. It doesn't mean there isn't a 13th floor, right? It means that you're not allowed to go there. In the same way that it's used in all other areas in society. It is a very highly secretive number and also highly valued.
Okay, so Ethan, do you have any advice for people who are detached from currency in the form of money? I have no interest or desire to invest or work under an institution for money or to fill up my bank account for the future. I trust that I will be carried and supported to do the work I need to fulfill and in that sense, feel fearless and confident. But then my ego steps in sometimes, and it makes me question if I'm being too risky and fearless.
Well, the only flaw I see in your logic is the questioning of your fearlessness. So if you truly are fearless and have a sense of peace and joy about your financial condition and everything's going to be fine, then everything will always be fine. You don't need money. You don't need money in this world. But if you, depending on what you plan to create in this world, you may or may not need that. So for me, if I want to create events in schools and these kind of things, and I'm functioning from a Western society, it helps to have money because things cost money. But there are yogis sitting in caves in India, and they don't eat, they don't drink, they don't need money, or people bring them food. So depending on where you live and your state of being, the universe will provide for you. But that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong or right with money. See, money should be like the air you breathe. So I use this example a lot. All of you are sitting here breathing air. You didn't even think about it until I mentioned it. And it just happens in the background. The universe is providing for you all the air that you need. You're not sitting there worried the person next to you is sucking all the air out of the room and is not going to be enough for you, right? And you're not holding your breath thinking, well, what if the next breath of air will not be there? So I better hold it in just in case. That kind of behavior, you'll pass out on the floor, right? And this is how people treat money, is they hold their breath. They are worried of spending because what if they run out? They're worried. They do a lot of things for money that they would never do otherwise. I mean, most people work at jobs they hate. So because of money. It's, well, I got to pay the bills, I've got kids, I've got, whatever. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with money. Money is good. It's just simply source energy filtering into material reality. So source energy is pure, infinite, has no form, but when it comes into third-dimensional material reality, it crystallizes into some form of money. And but it is not right or wrong. What's right or wrong is that we treat it in a way that is not very aligned with source. We worry about it. We think about it. None of you thought about breathing until I mentioned it. So, right? So if you could experience money without thought, without ever thinking about it, it just simply exists in the background. You're breathing it in, you're breathing it out. You don't even think about it being there. If you could experience it that way, then money has no meaning. It just simply serves you on your human journey in this third-dimensional reality for whatever purpose you need. And if one day you need more because you need to physically buy something, then you will have more. And if the next day you don't need any, you won't have any. Source provides for you that way. So money in itself has no meaning whatsoever. But because we give it so much meaning is why we suffer, and why some of us think we have to decide one way or another whether money is good or bad, or whether I should have it or not, or whatever. I mean, if you can get into a state where you're truly neutral about it, and I'm not saying very many people can do that, but if you truly can, and I wouldn't say that even some of the billionaires of the world are really neutral about money. Many of them have bigger problems than we do in terms of neutrality. But if you can into a state of neutrality about money, to where it is like you're breathing, you don't think about it, but it always is there in the background serving you in whatever way your human experience needs to be served, then that's the best way to be. Then it doesn't matter if you need it or you don't need it. So I think the biggest issue with this question, or the answer to this question, is not the question itself, but that you're asking the question. Because when you ask the question like that, it means you have resistance around money. Because you wouldn't be asking me, well, is it okay if I breathe? If I breathe too much, is that a problem? Or if I breathe too little? You wouldn't ask that question because it's inconsequential. So the issue isn't the money and how much you have. You should have as much as you want, or how much however much you need. The issue is that the question brings to mind the fact that there is a conversation going on, which means there's resistance around your ability for Source to serve you. And if that question can go away to where you never have to ask that, then you will truly be living in alignment with Source, at which point, no, money doesn't matter at all, because what you need, someone will give you, or they'll buy something that you sell, and when you don't need it, it won't be there. So you'll just be living in harmony with universal law.
I know this isn't financial advice, but do you have a favorite crypto?
A favorite crypto? Well, you know, everybody has a different approach to investing. So you can't necessarily say the same would be good for everybody, right? Some people are much more aggressive and more high risk tolerance. And they would take riskier things. Now, when I was in my teens and 20s, I started investing in futures. Then I have no idea what I was doing, and I lost a lot of money. But it was extremely high risk, and it's a different time period. So, but to answer your question directly. Nowadays, I'm not really interested, you know, I have so many things going on these days that I can't focus on trading like I used to do. So I'm more interested in long-term things. And so long-term meaning, the questions I ask myself are, will this cryptocurrency still be around in 15 years? If the answer is no, or if I even remotely doubt that it'll be here, then I wouldn't even touch it. Two, what is the network effect of the cryptocurrency? Meaning, how big is the network? So if two people buy a cryptocurrency, it has very little network effect. But if millions of people are involved, then it has a huge network effect. So for example, if Facebook only had 2 people on it, it would be pretty worthless because only 2 people can talk. But because they have billions of people or 1 billion people on it, it has value because of the number of people who are involved. So my second question is, what's the network effect? If the network effect is higher, I'm more inclined to be interested in that one. Where, there's some 10,000 cryptocurrencies right now, and most of them have very little network effect. Very few people actually invest in them. Third, what's the adoption level of that? Meaning, are financial institutions getting involved in it, and so on. Are governments getting involved, and so on? Because that also, if the governments and financial institutions are getting involved, then it's probably still going to be around for a long time and still has a lot of growth potential. And in terms of the whole space, cryptocurrency is really only at about maybe 10% adoption. So we're looking at like 1990 internet is where we are right now in cryptocurrency. So if you consider since the 1990s, how, right now, the internet is about 95% adoption level, I think maybe a little higher. Where back in 1990, it was about 10%. So cryptocurrency right now is about that at that point. So the advancement is huge in the future. And then one final thing, I prefer to earn interest. So I generally prefer things that I can earn interest on while they're just sitting there. So if the prices go up or down, doesn't really matter. They're still earning interest. So now, but that having been said, if most of those rules apply, that's a cryptocurrency I'm interested in. So generally, of course, Bitcoin, obviously. because most of those apply, and it's the number one cryptocurrency. It's certainly going to be here in 15 years. And Ethereum, also another obvious one, fits all that criteria. It's not exactly stakeable meaning earning interest to the same degree as some of the other ones are, but it's coming. With Ethereum, it could take 10 years, but anyhow, it'll probably be easy to do in another year. And I tend to also stick to the top 20 or the top 10. So Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano. I have off and on invested in some other ones, but I primarily keep in those. Polkadot, Cardano and Polkadot earn interest. Polkadot about 14%, I think. Cardano about 5 to 6%. So if you buy those, you can just let them sit there and they'll earn you interest. I mean, what's your bank account earning you? Less than 1%, maybe. So there's very little risk in those because they're highly adopted. They're being used by governments and institutions. They have huge network effects, and they earn interest. So why not? Meanwhile, your money that you have sitting in your bank account has lost 20% in the past 2 years because of inflation and government printing, which they're about to print several trillion more. So actually, money or wealth that you keep in a bank account is higher risk now than cryptocurrency, than the cryptocurrency that I mentioned anyway, because you can pretty much guarantee your dollars are going to lose value. Whereas with crypto, it's a very volatile market, but if you choose wisely, then 10 years from now, you're going to have a lot more than if you kept it in dollars in that same period of time. So, those are, I mine a little Litecoin and Dogecoin, but I don't buy it. I don't buy Doge, but Litecoin actually is unique in that if you mine it, you automatically get Dogecoin with it. So Litecoin miners will just mine Dogecoin too. So it's not like I have particular interest in Dogecoin. Those are some of them anyway. I can't think off the top of my head what other ones.
We have a couple more questions online, and then it's probably time to do the energy transfer. Real quick, Barb, can you remind us what the name of that bracelet was?
Tea tree agate.
Tea tree agate. Thank you. Okay, so this is for Ethan too. Would you kindly comment on what new and fresh ways should we consider developing our very best future regarding monetary structure and ways of exchanging products and services? Is it that we encourage and empower living and pursuing our passions in a manner that also serves many and not be a way or tool to instill fear and manipulate our rights and freedoms?
Like I was saying earlier, if the world leaders decided they were going to empower everybody to be amazing, people would do amazing things. But the thing is, see, and this is, I read a lot about human psychology too. It's just another area of interest of mine, and in particular, the psychology of money. And what you find in psychological research is that when people don't have the bare minimum that they need to have a basic life, to have their basic needs met, they do not aspire to bigger things. So let's take somebody like Bill Gates. He has billions of dollars, $100-some billion, right? So somebody like him, he eats roughly the same amount of food each of you eat. And he, sure, he probably has a bigger house than all of you have, but still, you can only have so big a house before it just becomes ridiculous. So at a certain point, your house is big enough. So you have food, you have lodging, clothes. Even if he bought the most expensive clothes, there's only so much you can spend on clothes. So at a certain point, you've also exhausted that. So once you get past the basic necessities that every human being needs to live in this world, the issue is that most human beings, let's take the U.S. for example, 50% of the population lives at or below the poverty line. That's probably going to be higher in the later part of this decade. So if you consider that those individuals have just barely enough for the basic necessities. When you have just barely enough for the basic necessities, you cannot aspire to something greater. You can't be thinking about, how am I going to feed the world, or how am I going to provide water for people who don't have water, or how am I going to raise consciousness? Most people, they're just thinking about, how do I make enough money to feed my family? Whereas somebody like Bill Gates, he has billions of dollars. He doesn't need more for food or homes or anything like that. So he can aspire to his whatever he wants to do with his life. And the problem in the world today is that all the people with all the money are the ones who are aspiring to do things, and those things are not for the betterment of the rest of humanity. But if everybody, or at least most people, were earning more than their basic necessities, then we would see a thriving world where, because now those individuals have the space in their life to aspire to something greater. They're not thinking, if I don't go to work today at a job I hate, then I'm not going to be able to put food on my table and we're going to be homeless. They don't, billionaires don't think that, because they don't have to think that. They have to think about, well, what do I want to do in the world? Most of them are not doing such nice things, but imagine if the rest of humanity had that range, that where money was not a factor in them choosing what they wanted to do with their lives. If that were to happen, then I think people would focus on what they really want to do, what they enjoy, what they're really good at. Now, my suggestion is always, and this is from my own way I live and having worked with a lot of people over the years to encourage them to do things in their life that are in alignment. There are certain philosophies, having somewhat of a business background. I've studied law of attraction and read tons of business books and things like that. And there are lots of philosophies about you build it, they will come, or law of attraction, where anybody can do anything or create anything. All they have to do is meditate on a vision board every day. I can tell you it doesn't work because I've done all those things in the past, and also work very closely with people who are experts in those things. And then the reason is because we are all unique manifestations of consciousness. I'm able to do certain things naturally and easily that none of you can do, because I'm me. I'm a unique expression of consciousness. And each of you can do something that nobody else in this room can do. So if you actually had the space to explore what that unique thing was, then that's the area where you could not only contribute the most to the world and make the world that much more amazing, but it's also the area where you could make the most money if money was something you needed and where you lived. And unfortunately, most people follow the conventional system. They go to school, they get brainwashed, they go to college, they get brainwashed a bit more, and then they could sit in a cubicle at a job they hate for the rest of their lives. And never really have the space to aspire to something greater, to even inquire within, why am I here? What am I good at? What do I love? I'm going to share, Michaela, your story. So Michaela is having some work done on her trees in her backyard. And so this tree guy comes over. Now, he's an expert in tree trimming and stuff like that, right? Different kinds of things relating to trees. And the whole time he's there, all he could talk about is his beehives. And how much he loves bees, and he makes some really amazing, high-quality honey that people are just going crazy over. And so she's telling me the story, and my thought is, well, why is he not a beekeeper? Why doesn't he do that? Because anybody who's that passionate about that and they're doing something that's unique, that they're really good at, that, the whole time he's there to do a job having to do with trees, he's talking about bees and honey, tells me that he's not doing the right thing. And that if he instead focused all his energy on this other thing that he really obviously enjoys, he would probably make way more money and make people a lot more happy and healthier and so on. And this is the problem I see in society, is that so many people are focused on doing this thing over here because, well, it's respectable, it pays the bills, it's safe. Safe has been the mantra the past 2 years. Everybody wants to be safe. But I can tell you that you don't want to be safe. You want to be happy. You want to be joyful. You want to be fulfilled. Those are not safe. Safe is a totally different thing. Safe is a very fear-based concept, because just the idea of safe means you're afraid, means there's something to be afraid of, which is why everybody's insane the last 2 years, because while everybody's striving for safeness, they are actually running scared from everything. And well, that's a perfect environment for a government to push your buttons and get you to do what they want you to do, because if you're afraid, you need protection. And whereas thriving and being enthusiastic and joyful and doing something you're really good at that you're also passionate about is not at all safe, but it's a much better life. So I would encourage all of you to explore the intersection between what you're really excited about and what you're really good at. It's not enough to just follow your bliss or your passions. I mean, that's another cliche term that is completely false. A lot of people say, follow your bliss, follow your passion. But if your bliss and your passion is something that you are not very good at, then no one's going to pay you for that. I use an example from my pot-smoking friend from back in the day. In my 20s, the guy who originally started getting interested in astrology, he was a hippie from this, who never actually stopped being a hippie. And he's no longer alive. He was a really great guy, but he smoked pot like you wouldn't believe. And so in his, he didn't live very long, not a surprise, but considering his lifestyle. But anyhow, he was brilliant at astrology, though. I mean, the guy had an amazing mind when it came to astrology. So he was my first exposure to the subject. I didn't believe in astrology. I thought it was garbage. But he would never stop talking about it. So finally, just to shut him up, I got some books and learned so I could at least know what he was saying. And that was where my journey began. And anyway, as he got older, now when he was a kid, he used to play guitar in a band. And so now he's 45 years old or something, and he hasn't touched a guitar in 30 years. He decides he's going to start a surf band. And so now he's got to relearn guitar because it's been so long. Well, he's really excited about it. He's really passionate about it, which is good, but he's not any good at it. He doesn't even know how to play guitar. So in your late 40s, to start a surf band and think that you can succeed at that immediately is not going to happen. Now, maybe if you spent a few years getting back into it and really getting good at it, okay, maybe. But this is where following your passion is not enough. You have to find the intersection between your passion and your unique ability, where there's an area that you're just really good. You could do it in your sleep, and you also love doing it. That's the area you should focus your attention. In that area, you will make more money than anything else. And I can tell you that you don't have to be a doctor or an engineer or any of those things. I come from an Indian family, so those were my accepted career choices as a child, which I completely shattered. The black sheep of the family, in case that's not already apparent. I did go to engineering school, though. But anyhow, if you follow that thing that makes you special, that you are really good at doing, you can make more money than any other field of work you could possibly work in. But it requires you to do a little introspection and explore what that is. I can tell you from all the people I've worked closely with over the years, it's true. It works every time. But so few people ever explore that. And partly it's because most people are just barely getting by, and so they don't have the time, the mind space to think about, why am I here? What can I do that's better than anyone else? What do I love? And and pursue that. But even if you have to do it on the side, maybe you're working somewhere and right now you just have to work there. Now, I had no choice. When the universe pushed me in this direction, it was a very forceful push. I didn't have the choice to decide, oh, I'm just going to work somewhere on the side and do this. I basically had to jump in with both feet and face the consequences of that. But it all came together in the end. But for some of you, maybe you want to take a more gradual path. But I would encourage you, in the very least, to do something on the side and let it develop while you're doing something else that you feel you have to do until you feel you don't have to do it anymore. Unless you're willing to jump in with both feet, which I do think is the best way, but it's not for the faint of heart. So it can be a bit stressful to jump from what is conventional and known into the unknown and do something completely out of left field. But, I've built my life on that the past 10 years, doing something completely conventional and unknown, and created something that didn't exist before. You can all do that. I have somewhat of an artistic background. When I was a kid, I was really into art, but I became very practical in my 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, and kind of abandoned all of that. But recently, I've started becoming interested in art again, and the funny thing, and because I have an entrepreneurial mindset, I'm just amazed at all the extraordinary things that people create in the world. All the unique forms of art and fabrics and things that they just created out of their own minds, and they make a lot of money selling those things that they're just really good at doing. And I think if everybody did that, if everybody on the planet did what I just said and pursued that intersection and did that for a living, everybody would thrive. You'd all be a lot happier and healthier. You'd live longer. Your kids would like you better. And your spouses would like you better. And the world would just be a blissful place. So it will happen. That future will come. It's up to you whether it comes now for you or if it doesn't come in this lifetime or comes much later. You can choose that at any time. So, okay, so I guess we have to do the energy transfer now. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, the energy transfer, you don't really need to know anything in particular. There are lots of YouTube videos in the early days where I talk more about what the process is and why I do it and so on. I'm not going to get into that today, but all you need to understand is as long as you're here and willing to participate or online willing to participate, the process will happen. It's facilitated through a 13th dimensional collective. It uses this physical body to make the process happen. I also help it along a little bit just through certain breathing techniques and such that I've learned over the years. But according to them, I don't have to do any of that. They'll just do it. Anyway, it's a two-part process. One where I will ask all of you to send your karmic density to me. Now, I would describe that as, so to reach a state of joy, to the earlier question that you asked about, am I in the state of joy or happiness or whatever, I see that as two things. One, it's the level of consciousness. So as your consciousness expands, your outer world can be chaotic and you'll be more and more still. But the other factor is the amount of density you're carrying in your energy field. Now, in the third dimension, there's a certain amount of density that we all need to even exist here. If you didn't have it, you would just float away. You'd disappear from this reality. And some of you would probably like to do that, but you chose to be here in this reality, so it must be a reason why you're here. But I find a lot of people in the spiritual conversation are trying so hard to get out of here, not considering the fact that they came here to be here. So you all came here to be here. But you don't need so much density. There are some gurus in India who their consciousness is so high, they eat a lot of food, for example, in order to stay rooted in the physical dimension, because physical food can create density. And so if your consciousness is so high that you cannot exist in this reality in any other way, then eating a lot of dense food will certainly help you stay here. But for most people, you have way too much density. And that density is accumulated through a lifetime of suffering and negative thinking and just living in a collective consciousness that is very dense to begin with. It can come from past lives and so on. And so that density tends to weigh down your human experience beyond what you need to just exist here. And this is why a lot of people suffer and go into fear and have more difficult lives. So if a human being can walk the earth with just enough density and a higher consciousness, as high as possible, then you can walk here very lightly and you can walk here very joyfully. So this process is to help you to move forward on that journey. And this physical body or physical structure is able to, let's say, take on your density without any harm to me personally. So you can transmit your density to me. Barb can see it in the room as it's happening. And so the benefit to you is you don't have to spend the rest of your life suffering carrying that around with you. And it doesn't affect me in any which way. So I don't recommend you try this at home. Now, I've had some conversations with the 13th Dimensional Collective through Michaela, and they said that this physical body was prepared to do this in this incarnation. And I have been tested by dowsers and other people, and somehow when I stand in areas where there's higher levels of electromagnetic fields and so on, it neutralizes in that area. So this physical body and its energy field in some way neutralizes dense energies in its environment. So you can send that density to me simply by holding the intention to do that. That's all you have to do, because this collective will pull it from you. But you can certainly focus, if you want, to visualize it as a dark cloud of energy from your physical body or energy field to mine. Don't worry about me. I've been doing this for years. If there was any harm, Barb could see it. So that process will be going on all throughout. And at the same time, this 13th Dimensional Collective will transmit an energy from the 13th dimension through my heart center to all of yours. And that's intended to raise your consciousness and vibration. And Barb says your auras will expand. So every time we do this, everybody's energy field expands 3 or 4 times. And it's cumulative effect. So the more often you do this, the less density you have, the more your energy field expands, the higher your consciousness goes, the happier you become. So we'll be doing this 2-part process for the duration. I play a little music in the background from our friend Mark Romero. If you like his music, you can find it on markromeromusic.com. And we'll just use that to just drown out the background noise, and it's very conducive to this. It's just kind of grown on me over the years since we started doing these events. So we'll do that throughout, and my eyes will be closed. I will ask you to close all of yours as well. Same process works for those of you who are at home. And you can use the videos from these events to repeat the process if you want, because this is not a physical thing. This is physically, I'm sitting here with you in a 3-dimensional space where there is time. But the 13th dimension does not exist in time. In their dimension, everything happens simultaneously. So if you use a video from this event that occurred in the past and you facilitate this process, they can facilitate it in your real time because they can jump forward and backward in time. They coexist in all times simultaneously. And I don't need to know, because I gave them permission coming into this life, into this body, to utilize this structure for their purpose for the duration of the time that I'm here. So this is why a lot of people use videos from these events all day and night long. I have no idea what's going on. So you're welcome to do that if you find it beneficial. Use it as often as you like, and come back to these events to repeat it in person if you'd like to. So that's a process. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay. Now, some of you may be energy sensitive. You may feel something, temperature change, vibration. Some people experience states of bliss, kundalini. Some of you may see colors or see guides in the room. That's quite often happens. And some of you may feel nothing, and it doesn't matter. Over the years, Barb's looked at the auras of people who didn't even want to be here. Somebody brought them here against their will. They don't believe in any of this stuff, and they felt nothing, but she could see their auras had changed. And I've noticed that too, because some of them, in the early years, they would call me or send me an email, and they'd tell me everything in their life changed. Now, one disclaimer, which I probably should have said before you walked in the room, but is when you change your energy field to such a degree as we're doing here today, which you might have noticed I'm sort of been shaking through the whole time I've been sitting here. So a lot of times the energy starts as soon as you walk in the room or I sit up here for this purpose. And so anyhow, when you change your energy field to that degree, your outer world has to change also. Because right now, the life you live, the reality in which you exist, is projected from within you, outside of you. So if your consciousness is high and you have very little density, it's going to create one version of reality for you, whereas if you are very dense, you're going to create another version of reality, which is why I live in a world where there's no virus. And a lot of people live in a world where they're in fear. Because in my world, the reality I'm projecting does not exist in that same reality. So the disclaimer is, I do get emails from people from time to time. They do an energy transfer, and the next day everything in their life collapses, and they want to know if I can fix it. I can't fix it, because once your energy field changes, sometimes the changes can be very dramatic, depending on where you are. Now, maybe you're very far along already, in which case it might just be a little adjustment. Or maybe your guides won't allow more than a little bit to happen because you couldn't handle the consequences of that. But if you do find a very dramatic change occurs, it's always in alignment with your own journey. So if such a thing occurs, it's a good thing. And let it happen and embrace whatever new is coming, because you're probably going to create a much better life on the other side. But that can certainly happen, so just keep that in mind. So, we're running late. Okay, so we're going to do the energy transfer now. We'll go for our 10 or 15 minutes, and I'll play some music in the background. So close your eyes, breathe comfortably, focus your intention on sending any density to me, and keep doing that all throughout. And the 13th Dimensional Collective will be sending a white light energy through my heart center to all of yours to raise your consciousness and vibration. And that'll be happening all throughout as well. So I'm going to be silent now, play a little music, and I'll come back when we're done. Oh, Barb, you want to just say what the room looks like? I forgot to.
Oh, the room's it's varied in energy right now. There's some people that have got a lot of energy, or their auras are up to the ceiling, and other people are lower energy. So see how it happens.
Okay, so let's begin. Okay, you can open your eyes whenever you're ready.
Wow. I mean, this was really wow. We had somebody over on that side, had 5 guides around them. Every single one of you, was connected to the source. Every single one was touched up. Every single one of you, I mean, you just, it just became so much lighter. I just saw it. I just shifted everyone, and every single one of you, you're connected. It's like, it was just absolutely unbelievable. And those people through the camera, I was watching the usually it's kind of like a dark cloud. I was watching it lighten up and lightening up and lightening up until all of a sudden I just saw this pink joy. I just oh my goodness. I don't usually get this, but wow, it was just
I saw the pink too.
yeah
Yeah,
was,
I really
wow.
did. Like I saw this huge flash of pink, and it was almost like I was kind of engulfed in this pink
Yeah.
color. It was really pretty.
It was incredible. I mean, and this one person had a bunch of guides come out, and just like surround him and just was hugging him and comforting him and just oh. I know I need to bring tissue. I never know it's going to hit me that hard, but wow, this was an awesome, awesome session. Really, really was. Yeah. Yeah. On my glasses up. Oh, it was beautiful. You guys, I mean, every one of you. There's no accidents. You all came in here to just really get lightened up and in person. I really feel it's stronger in person. Although the people in the camera, I've been practicing on working on, focusing on you all too. Even though I can't see you, I do feel the energy. See the energy coming through. So yeah. Oh, it was. I think this is. We've had some really good ones, but this one, really touched my heart. So thank you.
Any questions to finish, or we're good? Well, thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure serving you. We may be back here next month, depending on the venue and all of that. But if not, we will be virtual, so we'll see you on a live stream, and come to some of our other events if you can too. Thank you.